Here's your host, Sean Bond.
Hello, everybody. We're in for a very interesting and expansive show today. I have with us a guest that I brought on. Her name is KJ Scoops. She is a psionically activated, multidimensional, past life, bleeding over an awareness being, SSP, secret space program experiencer, targeted super soldier, psionic healer, psionic specialist is her category in healing, and her specialty is healing and protecting kids. And she has a lot of interesting information, and I'd like to introduce her to you guys. How are you, KJ?
Hi, how are you? Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, good. Hi, JP. Thank you for having me on here.
Well, you're very welcome, but it's Sean's show. I'm just the producer.
He's the modest producer. Can you explain to the crowd of people who you are, how you became who you are, and what kind of things you can do for the world and people to help them through their problems?
Well, that's a lot of things to explain in an hour. But my name's KJ. I am from the East Coast of America. I was born in 1977, so I am 41 years old. Let's see. I do experience psionic attacks when I go live, so I'm just letting people know if I hesitate, that's why. I do work with Silver Cord Spiritual Science. I'm a healer.
Co-founder.
Yeah.
I hit to mention the co-founder of Silver Cord Spiritual Science, so she knows her stuff, and you can absolutely go to her for that.
Thank you. Just to let people know who I am, where do I begin? I've kind of been awake my entire life, but I do have more of a background working with children. You can look at other interviews that I've talked about more of my birth and things like that, but it's too much to talk about in 1 hour, so I'm just gonna put that out there. You can search my name on YouTube, but basically, to let you know who I am, I have a very colorful background of a employment history. But number one is I have a degree in science, so I specialized in early childhood education, and I have worked with children for about 11 years in 4 states and in many programs. I did start out as an assistant right out of college, and then I went to college to be a graphic designer. And then I had one of those blackout moments where everything changed and I decided to be a teacher. And so I have a pretty big history of working with all age groups of children, from infants all the way up to school age. And I've had a lot of background with different education programs, and mostly in corporate, private sectors, nonprofit. Can you still hear me?
Yes.
Sorry. I just had like a cut off of the sound. Okay. And I have grown up, being in MK Ultra programs and my entire life, and I am a psionic, I guess you'd call a soldier in a sense. I'm trying not to bounce around too much, but I have had lots of experience with the programs, the secret space program, and when I was in the secret space program and the MK Ultra programs, I was used as the psionic tracker oftentimes. So basically I have memories of helping the positive and negative sides of that. So I want to stay on track here because I get
Yeah. You've been psionically trained in many different ways, not on just this timeline, but many different tangent timelines of temporal dilation for secret space program and other military-esque projects with Tesla teleportation and looking glass technology and aid to super soldiers on the battlefield in a way that amplifies their performance from a distance, as well as tracking down problems, seeing things, remote viewing. You have gained a whole plethora of skills as we've been partners in the business and have been sharing and unlocking lots of things in our DNA and structuring them and seeing them work, such as capturing demons, healing an individual, balancing their systems, DNA, healing and psionically programming amplification to detox like vaccinations, organ repair, a bunch of energetic operating systems and abilities that you unlock in a, like, for instance, children growing up to make them have an intensely more amplified life. So how about we talk about some of the things that you've experienced with providing service to children and helping them in their life path?
Okay. Well, I do have 2 children of my own, age 2 and 4. And this all started where before I could actually like tap into my abilities, I do have natural ability. So I don't have a lot of formal training. But what had happened was I had children, and you know, they have a father who is also a super soldier. I don't like that term, but that's what they call it, who is also involved in the program. So you can imagine that the targeting at that level is much higher than the average child. And it started out with them. I started noticing the issues with my first child when they were having night terrors, and it was the consistent waking up every night, 4, 5, 6 times a night, just screaming, hysterically, not knowing how to solve that. Just wondering, is it a bad dream? Is it an astral battle? Is it, what's going on? So that was my first, really drive to kind of figure out what's going on, because at that point it was something that was kind of unseen and I had to figure out how to solve that. So, like most parents that experience this, if you look up night terrors, what you'll see is a bunch of psychological things written by doctors who just say it's a bad dream and it'll go away. And what I found, because I'm also a targeted individual, is that it's actually not just a bad dream. They're getting attacked, especially with the arching of the back, which is the sign of like having your soul shards stolen. Being in a helpless state, which is what a lot of parents are, you don't know what to do, so you just do what comes natural. So I just would whisper in her ear, to fight. And I'd say, just fight. You can do it. I know that you're fighting, the bad guys. That's what I'd say to them or her. And, so the more this went on, the more I realized that I had to do something. And, it was probably a couple years later where I met Sean, and we kind of helped each other unlock abilities and work out resolving things, and started developing operating systems to help children and adults, and even animals, to better kind of unlock or close back doors and help them.
Coping mechanisms.
Yeah, coping mechanisms to get through these things. Even though we didn't have a solution to kind of like end it all, we do have tools that can help you get through to keep building your strength so that you can keep fighting this yourself. Children have no filters. They have no protection. In my opinion, they're probably more targeted than adults. And, so as I was going through my own self-awakening process, I had to include my children in that because, you know, you see a lot of adults doing this, you know, great self-help healing, but we oftentimes don't include the children, and you really need to because it all goes back to the DNA lineage, the genetic memory, and so as time went on, I was able to kind of tap more into my own abilities and start tracking and figuring out. Because one of the things that I can do is I can pick up almost like a red flag from pain physically, etherically, and kind of jump on that wave of the frequency and track it and figure out where the causation's coming from, who's doing it, how many people or things are doing it, and start figuring out solutions, how to stop it. There's multidimensionality is really broad, so there's a million things that you can get into as far as stopping a night terror or an attack. So it started out with helping my own children, and then you know, as more time goes on, the more I learn, the more I can teach my children. And so, this kind of evolved to, helping other people's children in the community. It all started out in the community, the truth community. I didn't start off by, you know, healing my friends' kids at work. You know, they're not awake. So, being in the truth community is, it's a pretty big community, and there's lots of different groups. So, you know, a lot of people go into this in different ways. Everybody finds their path in a different way. Some people will enter the truth community because they are more on the spiritual side, like they follow, you know, I don't know, like Greg Braden or whoever it is that they connect to. For me personally, I entered it through my own personal experiences of my own personal MK Ultra attacks, remote viewers that are watching me. I kind of picked up on something was going on, and I had to figure it out, and I kind of dove straight into the truth community through like the MK Ultra side of it. So
shadow self and
yeah, exactly. So, my own story, to explain how I operate, okay, let me back it up. So when you're in the programs and you're being, used for whatever it is that they use you for, oftentimes, what people don't realize, everybody thinks that you go through the same types of programs for everybody, and it's not like that. Everybody is treated differently depending on what you're used for, what your abilities are, what your genetics are, and what you can or can't do for consciousness. They base your programming and your alters and your triggers on that. So you see a lot of people, only talk about the dark stuff, the abuse and things like that. Well, for somebody like me, like a psychic soldier or a psionic person, we're used in these programs with that ability. So we're used to track things for different factions. So they know that they will, instead of, you know, inserting, you know, one or two SSP terms for memory, they will just wipe everything. And that's intense, because if we can track one thing, we can keep going and figure out the path. And so for somebody like me, I have had all of my memories wiped clean as far as I thought. And then I guess what you would call is something like the Adjustment Bureau would come in and make sure that I don't go down that path to put some breadcrumbs in my view, because as soon as those breadcrumbs are in my view, I can latch onto it and I can go for it and I can track it. And that is an ability that they like to suppress in people like me. So, it's been a long battle of trying. Yes. So, for myself, once I see it, I see it. So it's been more of a lifetime of just kind of being adjusted so I don't go down that path. But anybody knows that you have that instinct in you that knows that something else is happening and it's real. And no matter what anybody tells you, you have that spark in you that's just going to keep going until you find the answer, until you find like your purpose and why you're here. And, for me, it was just like, keep going, keep going. It was just, I knew something was there. I just had to find it. So it was a lot of astral experiences, and physical experiences that were invisible or hard to explain. I've experienced tons of things in the physical that made no sense. I've been shorting out electricity my entire life and then just being told, oh, it's just an electrical problem, or I'll turn radios on and off. I will, lots of electronic problems. I used to play in a band, so I'd have band equipment in my house, and I would have tube amps that were completely unplugged, and they would start like working. So there's a lot of things that I was experiencing that no matter what anybody told me, I knew that it was me doing this. It was something about me, and lots of seeing ghosts in the physical, and a lot of growing up with family that didn't believe in that. So I would tell them, oh, I saw this ghost, this is what's in our house. There's an old woman and a little boy. And, my mother would just say, oh, that's not real. So anyways, my point is that, being a psionic soldier or a psychic soldier, your lifetime path is much different than, say, somebody that was treated differently in the programs where they're given their full memory of, like, say, one or two terms where they were a slave or where they were a worker. And you see a lot of that in the secret space program where people are, only talking about these horrific times and these awful memories. And that's basically, they're allowed to see that. They could allow you to see that there are positive aspects. There are good things that happen to people. They have relationships and friendships in these programs that are completely blocked. So for me, like my memories, I have a lot of memories of things that were heart-based connections that bleed through no matter what. So I have memories of lots of rescues. I have memories of lots of handshakes, smiles, laughter. These are the just moments and flashes that I can see. And I believe that's a heart connection that can bleed through any blocking or programming.
Yeah. It's like a chess move that like plays out in the timeline that you, your higher self, future selves, spiritual entourage, beings around you that want to make the best possible timeline. What do we focus on a memory bleed over that has the best possible potential for healing the individual, focusing on something and bringing an amalgamation effect all in one thing? And a lot of that is usually the shadow aspect of visitation or abduction or SSP experiencing. And that is the most thing that's brought out because it's the biggest thing that needs healing. And so you get a lot done when you're aware of those first.
Right. Because I've done a few roundtables, and I've actually had a lot of flack from people saying, oh, like there are no positive aspects of the secret space program. It's all negative. But I have memories of positive things. And it's just my experience. I mean, there's other people that will have a completely opposite memory, but at the same time, everybody that's involved has been involved their entire life. It's not like an age thing where you get inducted when you're 8 years old. Like, if you're part of this, they know that before you're even born. So,
DNA lineage tracking thing,
yeah. Yeah. They know you're coming and they know you're going to be born, and that's a whole nother story. But, so, you hear a lot about people saying, oh, I've been on like a few terms. Well, I've been on so many terms that, it's almost like I'm afraid to tell the public how many I've been on. But the reality is that everybody involved has been in just as many terms. I've been in over a few hundred terms. So, since birth, I've been on SSP terms, before I was 1 year old and up. And my children have also already been on terms. And I know this because, what?
Yeah. Like, everyone usually has some type of visitation in their life in some way, shape, or form: temporal, dream time, physical, bilocation, sometimes clone, like consciousness transfer, like Avatar. It depends on the program, depends on the DNA, it depends on the spirit involved, who their soul family is, who they're targeted by. If the most positive secret space program factions are coming from the future to change this timeline, and a lot of the negative ones are anchored here in the now, mostly because they're limited in what they can do in time. But yeah, like you said, everyone has some type of stake in it because the future factions have ability to see spirits and are trying to see who's the most advantageous beings to work with that are here now in this game, to make the timeline go in the direction that each faction has an agenda for, like that. Right.
And there's many factions too. You hear a lot of people mentioning that, like, the top 5 or whatnot. There's thousands of races and, factions. And, just so people know, I've been in a lot of terms, for different lengths of times. I've entered lots of mystery schools. But one of the most notable things that I do in the secret space program is I am a pilot in the secret space program, and I fly ships. One of the most notable is the the Galactic Alliance ship carrier, which I wanted to mention, which is a ship that is used for what they do is it's used for debriefing political figures, any sort of high-ranked officials where they are brought off planet to be debriefed on SSP assets and SSP operations. I am a pilot of that ship, and I've been on a few missions. I went on one last year, which actually had Donald Trump on it, but there's another roundtable that's going to be released soon that talks about that. And then I went on the same ship this past month. So I feel that it's really important that people understand the secret space program and understand that, there's a lot of people on the planet that have kind of hit a ceiling or a plateau with their healing, and they actually refuse to believe the secret space program exists. And a lot of that has to do with the, fantastical corporate pushing of it, of certain beings that are kind of making the SSP look like this fantastical sci-fi movie. And unfortunately those things happen, but, I'm not going to mention names of people, but everybody knows, like, big names in the secret space program. Those are real people in the programs, but there's also a lot more than just that. So, if people don't know how things are getting pulled off or how things how they're able to do the things that they're doing, cause you hear about the abductions, how is it done? Is it a mental, like a consciousness shift into another body? Is it an actual abduction? There's a lot of questions. And I say yes, yes, yes to all of it. All of those things exist and all of those things happen. And, so just keep an open mind that it's much more broader than just what's here on Earth. It goes way out to so many universes. So, I am an active participant in the secret space program. I have done work with positive and negative groups. There's a lot of negative, and then what I've found is that sometimes when a person is abducted, negative things will happen to them, and then oftentimes there's a lot of groups that are working with you that want you to succeed, and what will happen is they'll abduct you right after that, and they'll reverse what was done to you that's negative, like nanotechnology and stuff like that. So it's not all dark and despair. We need the positive sides to counter the negative sides. It just kind of is. We need it.
Right.
And I know a lot of people say there's no positive part of it because it's all against free will. But if you ask a soldier while they're active in the programs, there's plenty of soldiers that will say, like, I volunteered to do this, because they're actually living a lifetime that they're conscious of at the time, but you come back here and they get their memories wiped. There's a lot of lifetimes going on in different places that are happening at the same time to you, and you're existing in many places at once. Does that make sense?
Yeah. And as, like, if people were to ask, like, why are we in the negative, programs and the factions? It's not like we want to be. It's more of like they targeted us, our spirit, our DNA lineage, and are attempting in an abduction while our higher self is like, mulling it over. Should I allow this to happen? Should I, prevent it? Cause it's a timeline incursion that's trying to steal our energy to allow it to exist. Sometimes we can prevent those. The ones that need to happen are basically you agreeing to a chess move, them fucking with you, or doing anything negative in entanglement makes a big trap, and you make it worse for them. And you're changing the negative program from the inside because it would exist regardless if you didn't want weren't in or not, and have a choice point and investment in turning those programs that are negative from dark into neutral and eventually into light, whatever that is on the timeline. And a lot of the positive programs are just that, changed from some other form, if they didn't already start positive from the beginning. Can you also go into some of the biggest problems you have faced that you've learned solutions for helping heal children that are targeted, that are going through these things, these trauma, pain, bleed overs from other lives, timelines, maybe visitations, abductions, or even like spiritual stuff, tantrums. Yeah, sorry. You know, depression, all that, suicide programs too.
Yeah, it's hard to determine suicide programs in kids because it kind of sometimes all looks the same at times. I have experience with children being under possession. So basically, like I said, my children are my biggest test. I am constantly working with them. As far, what I first had seen was lots of composite beings kind of infesting their energy fields, and that can include demons. People don't like that term, but sometimes they're there. There's all kinds of attachments that are just feeding on them. So I had learned about that, and I had learned how to, like I said, track and then identify them, because once I can connect to them, I can see them. And once you see something and it's brought into consciousness, it can be resolved quickly. So, that's like the number one thing that I had first started seeing in my own kids. And then, I help other people the same way. So what I had done is I would just continually clear them. So I would remove, these beings from them and then see what else is there. And then there would be, other things like feeder tubes, which are like assist the dreamtime harvesting. And, I learned how to disconnect those, cut them, burn them, sever them, however it is that I need to do it. And those can be installed anytime. I had, learned how to detect and find portals in my house, in their bedroom. And I actually have developed like a routine with my children, because it was, if they didn't sleep, I didn't sleep. So I had to sleep with my children every single night. because they would wake up so often that I would wake up and I would know something was going on, and I'd start tracking and I use muscle testing to double check my instincts. And then I would say, okay, there's 5 portals open. I'd close them, cut tubes, and then let them, and then they would immediately just fall back asleep. So that was like a continual thing, but it got extremely draining. So I had to figure out why this is happening. Where's it coming from? Is it coming from one thing or many things? So I would start tracking those things, and I would find back doors. I would clear I clear all the etheric parasites out of all their food before they eat it. I remove, disable physical implants. I would remove etherical implants. You name it. I would do anything I possibly could to make them feel better. And I wouldn't stop until they would be okay. So obviously with, it's really easy to say these things to an adult because they can take it and continue healing on their own. Kids can't do that. So when people say, oh, you need to do this or that, well, that's great, but it means nothing to a child because they don't have the cognitive reasoning skills until they're 4 years old, and that's when the frontal cortex in the brain starts to really develop and learn cause and effect. And so anybody, and I'm not saying 4 years old is the cutoff. I'm just saying that that's the average age where reasoning and where they can actually start seeing what's going on with them and tell you about it. So you have like babies and little toddlers who can't say anything. So you have to figure it out because, they're not going to tell you anything. So, this is where muscle testing is a really good tool. And I highly suggest that to anybody. I know we talked about making videos on how we do it. We should probably do that soon. But, cause everyone says, how do you do this? How are you able to see what you see? And that is a really good, tool for people that have no connection to the subconscious and the physical. You can use muscle testing as a starting point, as training wheels to kind of connect that physical to the subconscious in real time and then the more you do it, the more you practice, you don't need to do it anymore. And you just become instinctual. And there's many ways to do it. I have the way I like to do it. You have the way you like to do it. But,
So you know how to solve night terrors, tantrums, screaming out of nowhere, possession. If you ever pardon my French, have a demon acting in an alternate personality and kind of devilish in there, like little, but and then get them out of that personality and realize, wow, that is something different. Stolen stuff, getting back their, if anything happens to their dreaming body or the soul shards.
Right.
You sleep with your kids and protect them because they are very targeted. Pretty much every night they are, in my observation, up to targeting from different things that want to limit their timeline based on who they'll become, who they are in spirit, DNA, all these different back doors, and things that they're exposed to. And, there's a lot. So,
can I just
go into some tips that you go into to helping protect their dream space?
Okay. You mentioned a lot of kind of complex things that the average person probably would never think of. What the parents usually see is my kid's in trouble. What do I do? It's more than a bad dream. So, like I said, I find the causation of it. It's taken me a long time to learn how to do this, but now I know how to do it. So when I see a child, not just my own, if I see them acting up, what happens is there's two things that happen. The child is being influenced by something, but that influence is not only triggering the child, but it's triggering the parent to lose patience. So you have like a kind of like a double battle going on, because the more the child like acts up, the more the parents like, you know, their nerves start acting up. And you actually have like a ticking time bomb, and it's literally like a battle of, is the parent going to stay calm? Because we all know when the parent gets upset, the child gets upset, and it's like a constant thing. So, the parent really needs to be the bigger person and just stop and say, all right, my child's being influenced, and cut that off so they don't get influenced. And then, you have to figure out what's going on, because children go through what I call a demon streak, where they're totally fine and then they start acting out and acting kind of like a little demon. So, you know, they can hit things, they can, scream out weird things to you. And if you react to them, they might react even more negative. So you have to just stop. And even if they're yelling at you or screaming, you just have to, well, this is what I do. I start tracking it and I say, what's going on? What's infiltrating them? And I start just like cutting off those beings or those things as fast as I can. And then, actually going in and lowering their stress levels and their anxiety, their anger. And little by little, you start to see them slowing down and calming down. And all of a sudden, it's like a snap of a finger, they're back to normal. It's a multidimensional problem that if you go to a doctor, they're going to say, put your kid on medication. And it's like the worst thing you can possibly do. Like ADHD to me isn't a real thing. It's just an excuse for the big pharma to either make money and to suppress your children. And I won't get into vaccines and all that, but they have vaccines for kids and adults. Flu shots are adult vaccines. All these things suppress you from connecting to your inner self and your inner fire of who you are, your whole essence. So the more you medicate yourself, the harder it's going to be for you and for your kids too. And also sugar. My kids love sugar just like every kid. I actually found out not too long ago that sugar actually carries almost, I don't want to say like magic, but, there's lots of, power plays going on where sugar is actually, opening certain portals to your children. Within this last year, actually, this year specifically, because I get a lot of red flags that come to me as images in my mind, and one of them was sugar. And sugar, they've recently kind of upped the game, and sugar kind of has a triple effect on your child now, where it can open up back doors to your kid. And, these things are like multidimensional issues. So, it's really difficult. It's not easy to be a parent, and it's also extremely heartbreaking to see your child going through something that you can't solve, and to go to a doctor just kind of to medicate them is just a temporary solution that actually can be highly damaging to them. You don't know how they'll react to that. So, I'm hoping that parents can see, like, it's more awake parents that are aware of this, that they can see that there's something going on that is not, it's not something you can see. It's something in the subconscious. It's in their sleep. It's the dream time harvesting, things like that. And like I've mentioned before, the movie Monsters, Inc. is a perfect example of how this operates. It's a cute movie that talks about dream time harvesting, where they open up portals in your kid's room and they let things in. And I actually have an open dialogue with my oldest daughter who can talk. And one of the things I have done is, cause I know we only have like 20 minutes left. One of the things that I do is I have a bucket, or like a toy bucket in her bedroom that's called the Dream Basket. And I have paper and crayons and pencils in there. And I have kind of told every single day when my daughter wakes up, I said, did you have any dreams? And she'll say yes or no. And now she tells me voluntarily, but, it's gotten to the point where she's had a dream and she's gotten up before me and she's gone to the bucket and she's drawn a picture of what she saw in her dream. And then she says to me, Mommy, this is what I saw in my dream. And it's like, it's an actual tool that I use to work with her. And I say, well, tell me about it. What is it? How does it make you feel? What happened? What did you do? And that open dialogue starts where I am diffusing her fear of the astral. So I teach my children that I've had my child say to me, Mommy, a monster just jumped out of the TV. And it's sitting right there. And I say, where? And she points to the couch and she says, it's right there. And I'll look and I don't see it, but I'll scan it and then I'll see it and I'll say, tell me about it. What does it look like? And she'll tell me the color. I'll say, how do you feel? How does it make you feel? And she's like, I don't like it. It's scary. I said, okay, well, so let's help that monster. Let's help that monster, heal that monster so he can be your friend. Because I literally have to kind of dumb down, and I don't like that term, but you have to dumb down your etheric speaking language so that a child can understand it. And it's very, it's more about, listening and understanding, because what you have to do, cause like, for example, you, Sean, like you have an extremely expansive vocabulary, that sometimes can confuse some people if they're not at that level. And then, but that doesn't
right,
work.
like I would say something like, like how we explain how we, remove demons. We don't just like get rid of them or send them somewhere. We heal them in they're entangling with us. They're agreeing to our rules, have a karmic like balance in a way. We're not forcing them past this level, but we're getting them back into healing state and then sending them somewhere, that they're most important to disarming the system and then realizing that they don't have to keep doing their parasitic behavior and they grow back into a balanced light being.
Right. So that statement right there, if you tell that to a 4-year-old, they'll roll their eyes at you. And they'll say, I don't know what you're saying. So everything is super simple for a kid. So I'm trying to teach them that you don't have to be afraid of it. And, you can heal it. You can make this negative being your friend. And this is how you do it. So they see me clear things. They've seen me heal things, and they start mimicking me and putting their hands out. And I teach them your fingers are like magic wands, and they understand that. And, so when things happen, because things happen a lot, it's an open dialogue, because I have to, any good healer or friend for that matter, if you're at a higher level spiritually than the being you're talking to, you have to actually rearrange your own energy to mesh with the person you're talking to actually be on that level so you can have a mutual conversation that makes sense for both people. So there's absolutely no misunderstanding and no assumptions and no this is what you should do, and they don't understand that. You have to be on everybody you're talking to, you have to be on their level to have a mutual understanding. So that goes for children especially. So,
as an example, you would, make certain games for them so they get excited about learning the abilities, like taking some sage, little pieces of sage.
Yes, I was going to mention that. I'm glad you brought that up.
And then capturing the negative parasitic beings and then healing them, and then we would do a tallying count of what they got at the end, and then like, wow, you got this many, oh my god. And I've also witnessed you in the process of clearing Tegan in one of her Kaylin in her possession stage, where she was in a different room and you healed, went into the process of clearing her, and she would ramp up in screaming and would say literally the weirdest thing where like, stop healing me, mom, and stop clearing me, and that she wouldn't, like, there's no indication of that she would know that she was clearing her because she was in another room.
Yeah, there was a wall between me and her.
In her didn't want her to do that, and then once you got rid of them, she calmed down completely.
Yeah, exactly. There was a wall between us. She couldn't even see me, and I put my hands up to clear her, and as soon as I did that, the beings inside her started speaking and saying, no, no, no. And she ran around the corner to look at me, and I put my hands down, and I'd say, I'm not doing anything. and then she'd hide again, and then I put my hands up and I start clearing again, and then I would just do it. And that's when they start calming down. But yeah, anytime that you have the ability to connect to those beings feeding off somebody else, they react. So it happens to me often. And any of my clients that are listening know this, that as soon as I connect to them and I start tracking what's attached to them, weird things start happening. The computer will shut down. We'll get interference. And that's because like those beings have like, they have like elemental bandwidths in them or whatnot, and they can connect to the elementals in your electronics, so things start happening. I had a client whose phone started burning when I started connecting to the beings that are attached to him. So anytime you can identify the beings, they don't like that, because this kind of means the end of the road for them, because they most often don't want to be removed or healed. So,
they're in mind control of it and they don't know what it is.
Right. So they're in fear of like extinction, basically, even though I don't kill anything. I just heal it and send it to source if need be to take care of it. So in children, you see it a lot more because, with adults, you can kind of stay calm. With kids, they have no filter, so you will literally see. Like, you will see the being show themselves through behavior. And, sometimes kids will have different, like, facial expressions, or they'll, like I said, they'll get that demon streak. And that's your cue as a mother or a father, because usually, your kid, and anybody can tell you, oh, that's just them being bad kids. You should just spank them on the butt or something. Which is like, that's a whole nother issue, which I don't agree with. Because when you're spanking your child, or, in my opinion, giving the cute light abuse, which really isn't so cute, that's actually the parents being influenced by the child being influenced, and it's like a recipe for disaster. So you really need to be the bigger person and just stop your own behavior and recognize what's happening to your child, because it's you that's going to help them. It's not the child that's going to help themselves. If it keeps going on, they will just keep progressively getting more and more and more on them. So, let's get back to tips. There's only 10 minutes left, but one of the things that you can do for your child is I had created I have a nice newer one now, but at one point I had like a dream tent for them, a sleep tent. You can look up sleep tents. They're everywhere online. They're really good because they act as a giant dream catcher. I didn't realize how good they worked until I started sleeping in a tent in my house, and it's amazing. So, and I asked my kids, what do you want to use for your protection symbol? And my daughter said, I want the sun to protect me. And I didn't prompt her. She chose that. So we sat at the table and she made a sun and glued all the little pieces on it, made a little face. We hung it inside. And we have clouds and a sun in there, and that's the protection that she chose. We also have, crystals and stones hanging on the inside too. That's just one thing you can do to help your child. Also, you could, these are things that you can do if you have absolutely no experience in what I do. You can put a big bowl of crystals and stones or artifacts that you love in the bedroom with them. And those stones and crystals will, capture beings that are invading the space. And you can actually monitor that, and, if you have the ability, you can count how many beings it's caught, and then you can switch it out with new stones and clear the old ones, charge them, clean them, and then keep switching that out. I've also used, sea salt, dead sea salt, to sprinkle underneath the mattress, because all of these things won't solve everything, but each thing will solve some stuff. So if you kind of do a little bit of everything, you're good, because, if you're doing something, just do more of it. I also read soul contract revocations on behalf of my children. So any sort of beings invading their soul, or that have given them contracts against their will, I will say in the name of my children, and I will read it out loud, even if they're playing and they could care less what I'm doing. I do these things and it helps. And these are all things that you can do if you have no idea how to remove a demon or whatnot. I have a different skill, just like Sean, where it's kind of like a modern day demon slayer in a sense, except for I don't slay them, I heal them. So, you know, obviously I would love to work with everybody's children and help out, but not everybody, you know, can just like hire a demon slayer, you know? You gotta do what you gotta do. And, so, you know, and there's all kinds of factors involved too with like what they eat, can open up doors to them, what they watch on television. Televisions have sigils inside them. And of course we all know about Hollywood and television. And then there's also there's a lot of kids that watch things like YouTube, and YouTube has like an insane amount of bad stuff on there. And they have kids that are stars on YouTube that are infested with demons that can carry that right through to your kids. So no TV is best, but obviously it's not realistic for a lot of families. So it is best to keep it low, monitor it. I don't necessarily think completely sheltering them is the answer, because they do have to grow up in the 21st century. So you don't want your...
So like coping, could we also talk about how the importance of allowing the innocent inner child in each person into adulthood and keeping it alive, surviving, untraumatized, or at least healing the traumas and your ability to heal that? What we also went into is if you ever seen the show The Magicians on Netflix and Sci-Fi and stuff, we learned about a concept of shade, which is brought down, and in Soft Disclosure it talks about a aspect of a light body or a spirit that is, it has its own territory as the innocent inner child in our being, or the lower self, which is what we need to connect more with our higher self. And it can be traumatized, it can bleed over, it can affect our emotions. It has a mood, an attitude. You got to give it what it wants. There's whole healing practice on innocent inner child work, and like what you've observed with bringing a child into their power and keep it going into adulthood, so they become the best possible them that they can become.
Well, that's always an ongoing thing for me. I mean, my kids are still only 4, so I'm hoping that working with them, kind of retrieving their torn or stolen shades, will carry them into adulthood, you know, flawlessly without issues. But as
you healed your own too in adults and adult clients as well.
Yeah. I mean, like, it's like anything else, like, I'm just, what I do, it's a big subject to bring up, with 5 minutes left, the shade. But, basically I'll just be in general, what I do is, to be brief, is I work with each individual based on what they are experiencing. So if a client comes to me with a child or an adult, I have to first understand what's happening to them before I can actually get into those details of, you know, the stolen shades and the causation of certain things. So,
that's fine. It's mostly about the subject of bringing a child to surviving through childhood and any traumas with that, to being able to become a activated psionic being, because when we're children, we're more open to abilities,
right, and
they're less closed down. And also, I'd like you to name drop your information if people want to get hold of you.
Okay. All right. Yeah. So. You just asked me like a whole bunch of questions at once, but
teaching children's abilities and name drop stuff.
Okay, yeah. Yeah, so working with children, to basically set them up so they don't have the typical issues that you run into with, what's kind of suppressed on them as they start school and move into adulthood. But, I'm just going to get to like what I can do to help people, because we have no time left. But, I do, attachment, composite being demon removal, from this lifetime, past lifetimes, etheric implant removal, etheric parasite removal, psionic tracking and scanning. Depending on what you are looking for, I can track it. I can track pain, into your past life, and then we can go into that and resolve it. I work on memory block removal. I work on lineage curses. That's a big one. Lots of curses, in people's timelines. I can, lower stress, anxiety, insanity, and depression levels. I can repair auras on people if you're interested in that. I do remote viewing. I don't do as much remote viewing for people, but I can do it if necessary. Manifestation and visualization, mentor.
Can you name drop your information?
My information. Well, you can contact me through, www.silvercordss.com. And that's Silver, SILVERCORDSS.com. I'm also KJ Scoots on Facebook. And that is a handle name. It's not my real name. I do have a real job, just so people know. Like, if you want to know my real name, I'll let you know. I just don't put it on there because I do work for a company, and so there's that. But I also work on psionic defense and psychic surgery too. So I work with kids and adults. I really would love to focus on kids because it's a big area that is kind of unnoticed a lot. And so when you're doing your own healing, always include your kids. So,
and people can reach you on Facebook and your email and the website silvercordss.com, and on YouTube, Silvercord Spiritual Science. We'll re-upload this on, and JP's channel and stuff.
Yes. Send me a message, even if you just want to chat. I'd love to talk to everybody. I have some SSP roundtables coming out, with some more information on that. I'm sorry it was very short. There's not much time to discuss like a ton of things, but I really appreciate being on the show. I love Wolf Spirit Radio, so thank you.
Yeah. We may have you on again.